Sacha, how you doing?
Hey Mel, nice to hear your voice.
Yes, and you as well. Very, very distinctive. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through some of the old clips and watched some of the old stuff from the Breakthrough Energy Movement conference.
Oh yeah, in Amsterdam.
Yes, indeed. How's everything been going since then?
Good, good. Almost hitting the vertical. That'll almost certainly happen in the new year of 2014. But yeah, it's been a very, very good year. A year of grace.
So, thanks for taking the chance to speak to me. And just to let you know, I've been following your New Earth project with great interest. And there's a number of people who've asked me to actually just speak to you and find out a little bit more about you, obviously the project itself, but to just, I guess, dialogue and categorize your journey. I remember I found out a little bit about you, met you. You're a real gem at that conference, and there was some amazing pieces of poetry you read out, and I've been wanting to catch up with you for some time. So thank you, and grateful for the opportunity to finally do it.
Thank you, Mel. That's very kind.
Okay, wanted to start from the beginning. When I first met you last year at the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference in Amsterdam, actually it was in November, it's almost a year ago, you said to me that you grew up in Zimbabwe and you grew up in a war. I want to start there.
Yeah, well, that was the Rhodesian War for after the War for Independence. As you well know, it was a Frelimo War, and it was a pretty ugly one, which went on for a long time. And the rest of the world was drumming up that it was about apartheid and racism and what have you. But it was a lot less to do with that than it was to do with the sort of bitch end of the franchise of the Cold War chess game was being played out in Africa. In fact, it's always been played out in Africa, even since that time. So it's been more about covert control of the resources of Africa. But in any event, that was the time I grew up in the 70s and 80s in that part of Africa.
Okay, and then why did you leave?
Well, at the end of a war like that, when your country actually no longer exists, your birth certificate doesn't exist, you are effectively cast out, which is what happened. So we ended up effectively as, I guess you'd say, political refugees of a sort, and ended up back in Europe, which was a long time ago where my family stemmed from. So I ended up back in the United Kingdom, and I've maintained a base here ever since. But it took me at least 10 years before the British government would recognize me and give me a passport. So I was stateless for about a decade. Wow.
So how old were you when that happened?
Oh, don't ask me things like that, because I just have no linear memory whatsoever. But I was, must have been 17-ish when I left Africa, and yeah, around about that.
All right. And then obviously London, you had a music career. Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, let's not talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I decided after being first trained as a fine artist in an art academy, I decided that I wouldn't put any of that to use, and decided to go into rock and roll, which I did for a number of years, and we had a great run, the Stone band and myself, and that went on for the best part of a decade as well. And yeah, and once I felt I'd done my primal scream sufficiently, I put away childish things, so to speak, and decided to set up Humanit, which had always been my plan. But at that time, it was a pretty naive venture. It was, I wanted to set up a peace foundation. I had, because of my music and the small but fairly elitist fan base that I had, I just was in with really good circles, and I had pretty good access to members of the royal families in the Middle East and what have you, as a result of the fan base that I had with the Stone band. And I decided I would try to surf that wave and meet up with my mates and see if they could get their mummies and daddies to help bring about peace initiatives, and and I was principally looking at working with art, music and culture, and combining that with peace initiatives. So that was what Humanit began out as. And it took me a couple of years of traveling around the world meeting with various political and religious leaders that I had this access to, who took me to the side on a number of occasions. The nicer ones amongst them took me to the side and gave me a bit of an education, just said, look, you know, if you're really serious about peace and love and fellowship, there's a few things that you might need to know about sunshine, you know. And I was slowly kind of inculcated into a bit of the mysteries of what's really behind the veil. And that really piqued my interest, especially on the back of a few years of failed peace initiatives. I was not able to actually bring about any of these initiatives. And I was thinking, this is insane. What's going on? I'm doing all the right things. We're saying all the right stuff. We're making all the right approaches. We're accessing all the right corridors of power. So why the hell is none of this actually happening? And that was where I began to understand that even in the corridors of the United Nations, for instance, there's a hell of a lot of good people there. I mean, Mel, I spoke to you about
yes.
this. That I learned firsthand that probably 95 plus, if not 99% of the people in the corridors of power are just fundamentally decent humans who feel that they're plugging in to do some good. And certainly at the UN, that was my experience of getting close to that behemoth and trawling the corridors to some extent. I learned that the folks were, in the main, good humans whose lives and careers and good ideas had effectively been cauterized and hijacked by the machine. And I began to suspect that that was exactly why those multilateral institutions are actually set up to act as beacons to attract all the positive flow of ideas and enterprise and initiatives, and then to actually hijack them and stop them in their tracks. Because it is definitely the way with the UN that the capstone of the pyramid is made up of very, very decent beings, very decent human beings. And I'm talking right to the top. You talk about the Secretary General, you talk about the kind of leadership circle at the top. I've sat down with a number of these folks. They are the real deal. They're good humans who also, I've noticed in private conversation, are somewhat mystified the fact that things don't actually get done the way that they're intended. And then you've got the body politic of those institutions made up of the good people. But there seems to be a kind of a technocratic sliver that separates the capstone from the body politic. And that is where the condom is, so to speak, the psycho-intellectual condom, because it maintains a disconnect between the body politic and the head. And that, to my mind, is where I saw the egregious elements and the shadow elements conducting nefarious activity. But the same thing in the banking circuit. You can have owners of private banks who are just frankly dicks. I mean, they wake up and having inherited a bank, and they are bankers, and they go to Harvard and they learn banking, and they go back and they, you know, become the chairman of Daddy's bank. But they're not the players necessarily. The players are guys that you know, are really behind the veil. And a lot of people out there who are billionaires and multimillionaires don't own the money. They think they do, but they don't. And when the time is appointed, they can have their wealth collapsed and disappeared like smoke in front of them. So there's the Babylonian mysteries and the esoteric trends are very weird. It's a very weird domain, and nothing is really as it seems. In any event, I'll stop raving there, but just to let you know that my brush with power, which continues, proves out to me that the overwhelming number of folks, even in the institutions of power, are thoroughly decent beings. I say the same about the military and even the intelligence circuit. And I have a great many friends in that area. I mean, talking about guys very deeply embedded in the military and intelligence community who also, on the private, just say, what the hell is going on? I mean, you know, it's a mystery to a great many good Eagle Scouts as to why policy rolls out the way it does. But then soldiers and Eagle Scouts are designed to be soldiers and Eagle Scouts, and they don't have access to policy making. So there is this kind of compartmentalization within the hierarchies of power that ensure that the Babylonian priesthood and the Canaanite ritualists can continue their grand designs unchecked.
Okay. Thanks, that's excellent. That's brilliant information, Sacha. That explains a lot, because that leads into the next question with regards to explaining how the UN works with organizations like Humanitad. First, when did you start Humanitad again?
That was started in 1999.
Sure, okay. And then obviously, how does organizations like Humanitad work together with the UN?
Well, we're not accredited. We're not an accredited NGO. I never sought accreditation from anybody. We just set it up as a privately driven peace foundation governed by charitable financial regulations. So it's a non-profit organization effectively, but it's a bit of a hybrid organization. But it's not accredited by the UN, nor ever was. We've been accoladed by the UN on the floor of the General Assembly at an event that we did in 2009, which was really to, the Millennium Development Goal Awards was something we were briefly involved in and still hold license to, but we haven't been exercising that license. And that was really done as a kind of quid pro quo to get into the UN and begin to work with some of the good bodies within the United Nations. And again, I thought that would be a good way of creating a bridge, if not an exit strategy, for a number of goodly initiatives in the UN to be able to shake up and integrate more with the NGO community. NGO meaning non-governmental organization. Then, of course, you've got the IGO community, which is the intergovernmental organizations. And I was a Director General for an IGO in the UN for a year. That was the Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Organization. And I was asked to come in and shake up that organization and make it into something. And I agreed to do it on the basis that Humanitad was able to launch its initiative under multilateral observance, which was the Exemplar Zero initiative, which we did manage to launch in 2010 after some very dangerous shenanigans that we got caught up in, which I don't want to go into in this call. But we were taking on a lot of the powers, especially in the Gulf states. I was using my position there to shake up the energy game whilst I was Director General, and I launched an initiative to effectively put free energy on the table intergovernmentally so that it could come out of the closet and actually be recognized as the only subject worth talking about in renewable energies. Let's go to Velikovsky and Schauberger and Tesla and Reich and go back to the real science that has been suppressed and oppressed and repressed for over a century. So that was my rationale for integrating Humanitad's DNA with an IGO in the United Nations. But after a year, once we launched the initiative, we excised ourselves from the frame. And since subsequent to that, have not had any dealings with the UN. But the Exemplar Zero initiative is very much an initiative which has been launched under multilateral observance and will continue to be observed as such. And so we continue to create a cloak of protection and the capacity to foster and incubate technologies and protect innovators.
Wow. That's absolutely huge. You've done amazing work since 1999. Where do you see yourself going next with the project that you're involved with, the New Earth Project? Let's start with that.
I'm not so much involved in it as being pretty much the architect of the source code of it, because that is the culmination of 15 years of work. So the Humanitad ideal is kind of rolled into creating a metric, a full spectrum template of how to exit the what I call the serpent matrix, which is the existing civilizational matrix, which to my mind is clearly premised on the sacrifice of the blood of innocents. If we look at how our entire social ecology of the earth works right now, it is clearly more dysfunctional than arguably any time in the history of this world, whereupon the intercessionary principle is all that reigns. We have priests and bankers and teachers and lawyers and police and so on standing between humans and their capacity to be human. So we're in to coin that phrase of Jacques Fresco's, it's all fucked up, which it is. And let's just own that. And once we own that, perhaps we can enter into our own sovereignty as a living, breathing, bleeding heart and step out of that serpent matrix and become the determinants of our own fate. And the New Earth Project which is the fulmination program or initiative of Humanitad. And the very last initiative we'll really be putting out is the source code of a new civilizational matrix, which completely repairs humanity away from the need to survive only if you are capable of exploiting your fellow man. So we've spent years developing a full spectrum metric which encompasses everything from fractal community modeling to 0-point microgrids to health and wellness protocols that can walk you out of stage 4 cancer in weeks, or pretty much any condition. This is well known to any real healers on the planet. To effectively engaging in a new community model, whether it's a micro community or a macro community, which is not premised on the need of the totems of money, but is a 0-point economy based on a whole new scope of economic interaction, which I don't particularly want to go into in this call because that in itself is a very substantial conversation. But one of the core pillars of the New Earth metric is the law, governance, and sovereignty aspect of what we've been evolving. And I say we, this is me and an extensive crew of very brilliant thinkers. And what we have not done is sat down and tried to draw up a roadmap for humanity and said, well, there's the destination, here's the map, chaps, jump on the road and follow us. Hell no, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the complete dissolution of hierarchies and the dissolution of the commonly accepted modes and means of and patterns of governance. We do not need to be governed. Homo sapiens do not need to be governed. What Homo sapiens need is to be not governed, actually, and to be permitted into our full auto-determination and sovereignty. And once we stop foot binding, so to speak, the minds and the hearts of babies that are born into this world, they might just have a fair chance of growing into enlightened beings. And in fact, they would almost certainly grow into enlightened beings in a single generation. This entire plane of existence would flip into an enlightened state of being if we would just shut the hell up, forget everything we think we know, and re-engage with a prior unity, which is the source code of the human being in our true birthright. But the fact that we've allowed ourselves civilizationally to continuously be commandeered and coerced and manipulated and downgraded and undignified and ultimately mutated at the level of the genome, which is where the very scary story begins to emerge of how elements of the human family have engaged with non-terrestrial intelligence, so to speak, and begun a campaign targeting the human being's capacity to ascend, to engage with our own DNA activation. I mean, this is where the story becomes of critical importance. And so the New Earth Project ultimately addresses the consciousness aspect. But beneath that is the law and sovereignty and governance aspects. So we're also galvanizing huge support from around the world of lawyers and law experts and people who want to participate in this new law, which is teaching one another that we need to simply step out of the invisible contracts with governments and with institutions that have surreptitiously indentured us into trusts as individuals and stolen effectively our expression and have subjected us to a paradigm of bonded slavery, whereupon we're born, registered, flipped into birth bonds, cast adrift on the ocean, and have all of our birthright stolen from us by this Babylonian priesthood and these ritualists. And that's ultimately, I hope that covers the A to Z of the New Earth Project in a kind of rambling way. It's a hard question to answer, Mel, but that's pretty much it.
Okay, so a multi-layer, multi-level, multi-energetic, multi-dimensional project, very ambitious. How do you see it rolling out in terms of resources?
I'll get to that in a sec. It's rolling out effectively as a clarion call to all righteous human beings who wish to step out of the invisible contract with privately owned corporate nation states and a serpent matrix and step into a covenant of fellowship. Once they declare that sovereignty and make that independent declaration, establish their own court of record as a sovereign being, and then lean their individual court of record into the collective court of record, which is the de facto New Earth Nation, which is launching. And that New Earth Nation will be a beneficial society, a trust for people across all creeds, all national borders, all economic divides, all social divides, and will represent the interests of the common sovereign human being to the international political community, shall we say, and multilateral community, and will enforce its own law within its own court of record, meaning to say we will not tolerate our sovereign citizens having their freedoms infringed or their sovereignty infringed on by police or military or political or economically motivated institutions which seek to continue to harvest those same sovereign citizens. So it's a huge tasking ahead of us, but we are connected to the biggest movements on Earth. I think we are almost certainly the New Earth Project, the fastest growing movement on Earth right now, with literally many thousands of people every day joining up. And we haven't even launched formally. I mean, the formal launch will happen in a couple of weeks' time, in a few weeks' time. And within that embrace is an entire economy, the New Earth economy. And we've been informed variously over the last decade by the greatest economics brains on the planet. I say that absolutely standing behind those words. Those names will come out in due course, but now we have devised an entire economy and a means by which we can exit the fiat and totem fiat currency system altogether and do away with bankers and banking altogether. So more of that in the first quarter of next year when we launch the de facto New Earth exchange. We won't be calling it a bank, actually, and we won't be calling anything money. We'll be calling it currency, but it'll effectively be a promissory-based system for those people who understand a little about how economics works. But it's a fairly simple exit strategy from the serpent matrix, and all of that will be made clear once we unveil the New Earth portal within a few weeks' time. The first phase portal, I believe, is launching in December, and the second phase will probably be in March next year, where the full exchange will be gifted to the New Earth portal, which is the touchstone for conscious communities all around the planet, and our sovereign so-called citizens or residents all around the planet will have a touchstone, which will be the New Earth portal. And that portal is the first phase is launching in December, and the second phase, which launches the exchange, the economics exchange, will be in, I think we're looking at March next year.
Okay. Very interesting indeed.
But now, to answer your question very briefly, the resources, we're not looking at trees or timber and soil and water as being the resources. We're really looking at the resources being human ingenuity, human creativity, human energy, consciousness and action, reputation. This is the ultimate resource that we have, which is a limitless resource. And so when we talk about a resource-based economy, our resource is engendered through the most powerful energy form in this manifest universe, which is the human heart, the human mind. And that is absolutely where our economy, upon which our economy will be premised. But more of that when we launch it in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the ideal way to get going moving forward is ultimately to engage our eternal essence as a source of engaging and exchanging. Again, a resource is, the Jack Fresco resource-based economy model is, to me, I think, the thing that gave me hope. But having done a spiritual journey, after having awoken from that information, I've realized that it moves one up from there. And what you're talking about is exactly how I envision the ultimate, totally free, fair, just and sustainable society to be existing.
Yes, exactly correct. And I salute you for recognizing that and seeing that. A lot of people don't get it yet, and people get even very aggressive with us when we say, no, we don't look at that kind of resource-based economy, because frankly that is not ultimately where it's at. Why don't we take economy to exactly where we want it to be, which is endgame, which is where love, the capacity to love and be loved, fellowship, consciousness in action become, and noble expression become the ultimate resource that we're able to gift and receive in this world. So for heaven's sake, let's go straight for that. In any event, I appreciate why it's difficult for many people to understand why a resource-based economy in our mindset is not to do with natural resources.
Okay. Now, let me ask you something else. It's a difficult one, moving people who are largely now of a mindset where they're working through trade of some sort, be it currency, be it services and goods. They're working in some form of trade. Getting them to give up all the ideals, and now we're talking as well about perhaps the wealthy merchant class and even sort of the well-to-do. We're not talking about the elitists, but those who have a substantial amount of money. Getting them to believe that everything they've worked their entire life for, all the money they have actually is all pointless, and they must move towards a system of energetic exchange. This is for me where I see the largest opposition coming, is from the sort of wealthy merchant working class who have worked their whole lives and achieved something and done so much, and now suddenly it's a completely different system, and this is where I find the strongest opposition coming in. How do you go about explaining it to these people?
We don't. I have no interest in proselytizing to anyone. You either get it or you don't get it, and that's a trigger of consciousness. And if you do get it, your footsteps will enjoin the great footsteps marching into a golden horizon. And the emerging world is an absolute. It's not accepting too much of the old DNA.
Okay. Now, all right. So
to be crossed over. I mean, I said, but I do know what the question is, and I'm getting to it. But the point is this: is that people who are still entrenched in the old metric of blood money, and having acquired wealth and piled it up in bank accounts, those are precisely the people, I would imagine, who are waking up round about now to the complete illusory nature of fiat money. I mean, I was on the phone to a billionaire last week who was looking to investigate where it would be possible to transition into our economy. And because this individual had recognized that millions, if not tens of millions of dollars worth of notes were not being honored by the bank that they had, had those notes sold to them by over the years. So banks are not promising to pay the bearer on demand, but it's a confounded lie. They are not paying the bearer on demand, and nor did they ever intend to ultimately. We all know that banking is a game of musical chairs, and we all know that the House of Rothschild and the Babylonian priesthood behind that enterprise are the ones that take the chairs every time the music stops. That's the way it's been rigged. That's the way it's been designed.
Okay. All right. So do you not foresee some kind of bridge from the system that we are going from now into where you ultimately want to be? Or is it going to be a direct sort of one to the other?
I think we are offering the bridge. And again, we're setting up a fund, which you could call a mutual fund, and people are able to lean assets into that fund and monetize it into our currency, which is a promissory currency. Just so you know, Mel, with the New Earth Project, we're already beginning master planning in up to 40 countries, and that's in less than 20 weeks since the soft launch. And we're having huge land holdings thrown at the project and at the supranational or extraterritorial trust that we've setting into play. So people are recognizing that we've set into play a huge umbrella, beneficial society, supranational extraterritorial trust, which is a protectorate of the land holdings of the people who are coming into the new earth as our de facto citizens. And I use that word obviously very guardedly. But the communities, people who own farms and woodlands and mountains and lakes are also coming to us and saying, hell, I'm not going to own my land holding much longer at the way that my government is trying to penalize our land holdings and tax us. So if we place our land into the New Earth extraterritorial trust and then designate ourselves as the beneficiaries or the custodians of this land holding for life and in perpetuity, then those people are secure for all time and their families will be secured in those lands. But This is the curiosity. They've given up de facto ownership and become custodians and beneficiaries instead, which is exactly what they should be. And it's exactly how we should be recognizing ourselves. So no one can ever steal that land from underneath them once it's docked into the supranational trust. But they will simply have to agree to be custodians and beneficiaries for all time and never be in a position to sell that land for a profit. And do you understand the significance here? We're saying to people, this business of inflation and profiteering is cannibalism. It's the vampiric principle. And that is what we need to stop participating in, that kind of feedback cycle. Yeah. So once we say, hey, this is my land, I love this patch, I love this water source and this forest and this whatever it is, and this is, I'm happy with this. Now surrender the ownership, put it into a trust, and allow that trust to leave the earth and dock into the new earth, extraterritorial trust. And now, all of a sudden, no local or municipal or federal authorities can lay claim to that land because it's in trust. And you are free now to not have to participate in the rat race in order to sustain that beautiful life that you only ever wanted, which was to sit on your riverbank and look at the clouds. So it's making sense to a whole lot of people, the economy that we've set into play.
Tell me, are the various governments surrounding the lands in which these pieces of lands are going to be put into external trusts, are the governments and authorities surrounding these going to acknowledge the jurisdiction, do you think?
Not remotely concerned, philosophically speaking, whether they, or intellectually speaking, whether they do recognize it or not. What we are recognizing is a few things. One, that every single nation state is an illicit, a highly unlawful and treasonable corporate entity, which is trading Homo sapiens for profit. So that's what we're recognizing. We're recognizing that we are establishing a jurisdiction which is under the benevolent gaze of universal justice and natural rights, and backed up by millions and millions and millions and millions of human beings all around the earth who are awakening. So that is the only force to really reckon with, is the actuated human heart. And once that actuated human heart has begun to galvanize into millions, which it has, then I would suggest that it is the illicit systems, institutions, and corporate nation states that are going to have to revisit their own reality, not the other way around.
Yeah, brilliant perspective. Okay.
We can drill into that now. If you want to get into, because I know that was a slightly woolly answer, but I actually meant every word of it. But if you want to talk about the mechanics of how do we enforce sovereignty.
Yes, I do, really.
Let's talk about that. We establish our own court of record. We have our own special prosecutors, our own barristers, our own community network of lawyers, experts in constitutional law, commercial law, trust law, all around the earth. And by the end of first quarter of next year, that community of lawyers is going to go into the many, many thousands, all connected to the New Earth community and the New Earth nation. And those lawyers will be gifting a consultancy time every week, every month. A few hours here, a few hours there. But we're putting together also an international tribunal. I should call it a supranational tribunal for natural justice. So that is also something which we've been architecting for the last couple of years. And again, how has any nation state eventuated into its nation state? It's been through conquest, it's been through treachery, through deceit, through bloodshed, through all of the shenanigans of the serpent mind engaging with humanity. We're talking about simply walking away from that nonsensical paradigm and beginning to engender and engage a paradigm and a worldview which resonates with the common human heart. And we know that we have at least 6.9 billion human beings who would be in full agreement with that.
Okay. Tell me, are your legal systems being backed by common law, or are they taking on a completely new paradigm and template altogether?
That's actually a conversation which we should get into on a different conversation, which I would love to do. And I'd love to bring a couple of our law gurus in and really drill into that. Common law is a part of it. But as I've been educated by my chief law advisor, who was the one to say to me when I was last rattling the human rights stick. In fact, it was earlier this year when Humanit were engaged in trying to save Anand Krishna, the spiritual leader in Indonesia, from a siege, and I was under siege with the guy, and I was rattling on about human rights and screaming from the rooftops, and we were in a pitched battle with the authorities in Indonesia on this issue, trying to protect the human rights of this wonderful man. And it was my law advisor who took me aside and really said, Sacha, think about it. In a truly sovereign world, you shouldn't even need to couch the term human rights. We shouldn't even need to have to frame human rights. We are born with all rights intact. So let's not participate in that conversation about human rights or not human rights. Let's just assume, the assumption should be that we have all human rights intact from our birth, and let's just insist on that from this point on. So I fully understand the subtlety of what he was getting across to me, and so it's no longer human rights or common law that we're batting for, so to speak, but common law absolutely engages here. You, Mel, of all people, will be conversant with the successes and the failures of the common law movement.
Yes.
And there are some very great souls out there. The most recent one, Talgut, this extraordinary mountain man, I think in Montana in the US, who last week stood in court, or actually sat in court and defended himself, and was then arrested at his next hearing. But he was kidnapped, and it all happened in broad daylight. And to Talgut, to my mind, this extraordinary man epitomizes for me the feminized patriarch. The most powerful element that we could be using right now in law is the strength of a man with the noble expression and the gentleness of the woman. And we just have to navigate through the treachery of law, actually using the human heart and using our conscience, because ultimately that's we know that all law forms are effectively constructed to deceive humans. It is an esoteric language, a Babylonian language, which is designed to confuse the hell out of all of us. So is the banking language. In any event, common law, of course, will prevail and does prevail, but it's more than that. It's natural justice and universal law, which is effectively us declaring ourselves as the living human, and as the living human, not needing to defend any position, provided we're not harming anyone else. Anything and everything that we do is relatively acceptable. We could get into 1,000 abstruse conversations on this, but fundamentally that is the premise.
Okay. I have an excellent think tank of people who I'd really like to spend some time getting to chat with you, Sacha. I don't know if anyone's been in touch with you with regards to some of the collateral accounts and things that are being released around the world. Do you know anything about that?
Are you talking about the OPPT movement?
No, not even the OPPT movement. I'm talking about the release of some of the global collateral accounts to help kickstart some of these initiatives.
And it surfaces on my desk normally once a week. But I've got great misgivings about the validity of these reports. I'm very keen to engage with anyone. If you say you've got folks that can educate me, I'd be very, very happy to have that conversation. But I mean, I am someone who for over a decade has been heavily steeped in the most treacherous levels of deception in high banking and financing. We've been very involved in it, and you talk about Federal Reserve trading programs and high yield programs and all of these promises. I'm just very, very cynical about what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and so you should be. To be honest with you, it wouldn't be right if you weren't, and I am too. But what I'm seeing from some of the things that I have been following up on as an investigative journalist and getting involved with is that there are one or two avenues that look like they potentially could produce a huge amount of funding directly focused into humanitarian and human obligation funds. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to get in touch with you about the New Earth Project, is because you came across the desk of a lovely think tank of people I work with, really some of the most brilliant law minds on the planet who, you know, again, if you're doing what you're doing, would love to connect you with them, because I'm sure they could contribute to the overall structure that you're trying to put together. And we're all in this together, as you know. We all got to pool our resources and intelligences and geniuses and try and come up with the best possible solution. So there, I really would like to connect you guys. But certainly what you have come up with the New Earth Project is definitely in alignment and the fundamental orientation of what we're trying to get to do, the sort of projects we're trying to give a kickstart to. That's definitely where it's at from what you've said. So be very interested to work with you further on this.
Beautiful, thank you. I've been engaging very much with the erstwhile OPPT crew. In the last couple of weeks, we've done a few radio shows together. We did participate in a big festival meeting in Norway on this last weekend. It's a round table in a conversation, and we're looking at the UCC filings and the IUV and the One People movement, and working closely with Mike Tellinger and the Ubuntu movement as well. So we are all pretty much in full synergy there, and absolutely let's continue this conversation.
Fantastic, yeah. Now, there's a lot of projects that have come off the back of OPPT. I know Lisa Harrison's a very dear friend of mine. I've worked with her extensively, and a couple of the people who you've obviously been speaking to. I know about the festival in Norway, because Lisa says, I'm in Norway, I've just landed. She sent me a Skype message, and she told me all about what they've been doing, what she's been up to, traveling with all the people. And I know she said she was catching up with you, which reminded me, of course, to catch up with you as well. But there are some wonderful projects that have come off the back of OPPT. Whether or not the OPPT filings have been effective in their totality in terms of remedy, the basic core principle behind the core UCC filing, that and there's no claim greater on us than that of our creator, for me, it made sense. That resonated, and I went with that. And there's a number of projects I've since become involved with that have worked off the back of that, and that are doing amazing things. And it's flying. Everybody seems to be coming together on this amazing synergy, and there's a lot going on at the moment. So, you know, congratulations on all the work you're doing, Sacha, really.
Thank you, Mel. Very much appreciate it. I would say this, that just remember the good people who are, you know, locked down in bureaucracies and in the technocracies. Think about the good folks working in the corridors of power, and in the military, and in the policing establishment, and in the intelligence fraternity. There are a hell of a lot of good Eagle Scouts there. There are really, these folks more than anyone need a road of love and redemption, absolution, and exit strategy from that matrix. Many of them are waking up to the fact that their intelligences and their lives, their energies have been co-opted to serve a very dark path. And it is those folks, I think, that we really need to extend our love and support toward.
And I know why you bring it back to this full circle, and I thank you for doing that. It's an appropriate way to bring this to conclusion. Is at our meeting last year at the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference, I was still in that very dualistic space. And, you know, you evolve all the time with your information, but of the good guys and the bad guys. And the UN are very much, to me, the bad guys. But not only through meeting you and learning more about your perspective and your organization and how it works in synergy with the UN, but through my own work with other organizations that have been come off the back of OPPT. I'm now actually working with the UN as well. Can you believe it, Sacha? After having been so ridiculously paranoid about it back then, and this is why I want to say thank you, because you actually opened my eyes to the fact that not all people in these organizations are bad, and I really started looking into that, and I know that for myself. So again, thank you very much.
That's beautiful to hear. Thank you. I'm still getting hate mail every week from people. I get smear campaigns and death threats, and people, you know, calling me out for being a stooge of the New World Order and all the rest of it. So coming from you, who was an adversary intellectually in this stuff a year ago, this is beautiful to hear. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Don't worry. I've also had some of recently been called a Vatican assassin, working for MI5 and all sorts. So do you know what I say? If you're not being called that stuff, you're obviously not being effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway. Anyway, Sacha, it's been great to catch up with you again, and we must do this again, and really want to connect my people with your people, so let's chat soon.
Good stuff. Thank you, Malcolm.
Brilliant. You too. Take care. Bye-bye.